You already have a picture of a medieval kingdom in your head. Thrones, feasts, stone walls thick enough to shelter a town. A world where the powerful held everything and the rest survived on what the powerful allowed. But reality was much harder than history taught you. The thing that brought medieval kingdoms to their knees most consistently was not always an army, not a siege, not the plague, not an enemy at the gate, the water. The thing most people consider completely solved today was the silent killer at the center of medieval survival. Every kingdom that outlasted the others, not the strongest, not the wealthiest, solved it for close to nothing. And the kingdoms that did not solve it did not struggle. They died. The Cistercian monks at Fountains Abbey in Yorkshire had this figured out by 1132. What they built is still visible in the ground there today. You can rebuild the same system this weekend. Your total cost will land somewhere between $4 and $0. This was made inconvenient for you very deliberately. Around 1908. The exact year, the exact industry, and the exact reason, coming up in under a minute. The average American household pays over $1,000 a year to have water treated and delivered, according to the United States Environmental Protection Agency's 2021 Drinking Water Infrastructure Needs Survey. Medieval engineers paid nothing. There is one specific decision the Cistercian monks at Fountains Abbey made about how they handled water that turned a temporary fix into something that outlasted the monastery itself. Not the stone they used, not the source they drew from. One decision about what happens between the water and the person drinking it. That decision is coming up. The global bottled water industry generates over $300 billion every single year. That figure comes from the International Bottled Water Association's own annual market reports. Add the municipal water treatment chemical supply chain, chlorine, aluminum sulfate, coagulating agents bought on recurring delivery contracts, and the total climbs past $500 billion globally per year. The year that slow sand filtration, the medieval method, was quietly phased out of American municipal water systems was 1908. That is the year Jersey City. New Jersey became the first American city to chlorinate its drinking water supply at scale. That transition is documented in Emmon Baker's 1949 History of Water Treatment, The Quest for Pure Water, published by the American Water Works Association. Within 15 years of Jersey City, chemical treatment had replaced natural biological filtration in virtually every major American city. The capital cost of a slow sand system is high up front. The recurring cost is close to zero. The capital cost of a chemical dosing system is lower up front. The recurring cost never stops. It runs every month, every year, for as long as the city exists. You cannot sell a subscription to sand. You cannot invoice a biological layer that forms on its own, runs on its own, and costs nothing to feed. Communities that could not build or maintain natural filtration did not pay more and receive inferior water. They got sick. They did not get sick gradually and recover. They got sick and died, and the settlements built on top of contaminated sources died with them. The documented death toll from waterborne disease during the Great Famine of 1315 to 1322 was compounded directly by contaminated water sources, as historian William Chester Jordan described in his 1996 study. The Great Famine, Northern Europe in the early 14th century. Populations displaced by famine crowded around shared water sources that had no filtration maintaining them. The result was not a water problem that added difficulty to a famine. It was a water problem that turned a famine into an extinction event for entire communities. Not struggled, died. Intact medieval filtration cannot be invoiced. That is the sentence that explains 1908. But here's the part the industry hoped you would never ask. Exactly how it worked. That is what comes next. This is not a new idea. Persian engineers were using underground stone-lined channels, called qanats, to filter groundwater through natural sediment beds continuously from at least the first millennium BCE through the medieval Islamic period. The continuity of qanat engineering through the medieval era is documented in Paul Ward English's 1968 geographical study, City and Village in Iran, published by the University of Wisconsin Press. The principle never changed across 3,000 years of recorded use. Slow movement through layered material, gravity doing the work, biology finishing it. But the clearest surviving evidence of systematic biological water filtration in medieval Europe is a single drawing. A pen and ink diagram made around the year 1153, currently held in Trinity College, Cambridge, as part of the manuscript known as the Edwine Psalter, MSR 17.1. It shows the complete water management system of Canterbury Cathedral Priory in England, settling tanks drawn upstream of distribution channels, what the diagram's own inscriptions describe as purification stages before water entered the monk's kitchen and domestic buildings. Robert Willis documented this drawing in precise architectural detail in his 1869 work on the convent buildings of Canterbury Cathedral, and the diagram has been examined and verified by architectural historians continuously since that publication. The monks at Canterbury were not experimenting. They had already watched what contaminated water did to a community. They built the system because observation had proven the consequence of not building it. At Fountains Abbey, founded in 1132 by Cistercian monks in Yorkshire, historian Glyn Copac documented in his 1993 English Heritage monograph on the site that the monks diverted the River Skell through a series of settling channels and filtration beds that served the entire monastic complex. At peak occupation, that complex housed over 300 people. The system was never designed around chemical inputs. It was designed around gravity and time. Water moved slowly through layered material. Biology did the work that no chemical was ever purchased to do. What medieval engineers understood about how water cleans itself, and what you're about to build for $4, starts with one physical principle so simple it fits in a single sentence. Medieval kingdoms solved this permanently. Then one industry made that permanent solution inconvenient. Not wrong, inconvenient. The billing cycle simply did not have room for free. According to the EPA's 2021 Drinking Water Infrastructure Needs Survey, American households connected to public water systems pay an average of over $1,000 per year in combined water supply and treatment costs. That figure does not include bottled water spending. Every single medieval monastery that survived the 14th century solved this without paying anyone, without a bill, without a supplier, without a service contract. The Cistercian water management system at Fountains Abbey, documented by Glyn Copac and confirmed through English Heritage's archaeological surveys of the Abbey site, ran continuously for over 4 centuries without a single chemical delivery. The physics has not changed by a single variable since 1132. It is operating in the soil beneath that site right now, and almost nobody is using it. You have seen this your whole life and just never connected the dots. You know what happens when you leave a glass of murky river water sitting still on your counter for a few hours. The heavy particles sink to the bottom. The water above them clears. That is settling. The first stage of exactly the system Canterbury Cathedral Priory drew in 1153. You know what a coffee filter does. Water passes through a fine medium. Particles too large to squeeze through stay behind. The cup below is cleaner than the water you poured in. That is mechanical filtration. The second stage, you have probably noticed the thin film that grows on the damp surface of a clay pot left outside, or the faint gray-green crust that forms on wet river stones that never quite dry out. That biological layer, living organisms anchored to a wet surface, actively consumes organic material and pathogens in the water moving past it. It is not decoration. It is not contamination. It is the third stage of what the Canterbury monks drew in 1153, and it is the one that does most of the actual pathogen removal. It is also the one that most people who try to build this system completely destroy before it has a single week to establish itself. Most people who try to replicate what the monks at Fountains Abbey built get one step wrong. It is the first step. Here's what you need. Here's what you need. I want to be honest with you about every number. One food-grade plastic bucket, 5 gallons, cost at any hardware store is about $4. If you already have one, sitting in a garage, cost is $0. Coarse gravel, the kind you pick up from any creek bed, garden, or landscaping pile. A layer about as deep as your closed fist laid flat on a table. Cost is nothing if you gather it yourself from any waterway. Fine sand, clean river sand, or play sand from a hardware store. Not beach sand. The salt content disrupts the biology that does the actual filtering. A bag of play sand at any hardware store costs about $6. A riverbed or a sandbar gives it to you for nothing. One short length of rigid plastic tubing about as long as your index finger. Cost is under $1 at any hardware store, or free from any garden center scrap bin. A small piece of fine mesh fabric, an old pillowcase works. A square of nylon window screen works. Its function is to hold the sand in place above the gravel layer, not to filter the water. That is genuinely it. Total cost, $0 to $10. That range depends entirely on whether you drive to a hardware store or walk to a creek. Here's the one thing most people get wrong. They assume the sand is doing the filtering. It is not. Failed medieval water systems, including those that contributed directly to disease outbreaks in poorly maintained communities, use the exact same sand as successful ones. The material in a Cistercian filtration bed and the material in a failed open well surround look identical to the eye. Sand was never the variable. The variable is what grows in the top half-inch of sand after water has been passing through it slowly for 2 to 3 weeks. Glyn Copac's 1993 English Heritage monograph on Fountains Abbey notes that the Cistercians maintained their water channels and filtration beds continuously, never allowed to fully dry out, never scrubbed, never aggressively cleaned during normal operation. They understood through direct observation across centuries what laboratory science confirmed much later. A living biological layer forms naturally at the surface where slow-moving water meets fine sand. German water engineers studying these systems in the 1880s gave it a name. They called it the Schmutzdecke. It translates directly as dirty skin. It looks like a thin, gray-green crust on the top of the sand. It looks exactly like something you should remove. It is the entire point of the filter. That layer contains more living organisms per handful of sand than there were people in any medieval city. They consume pathogens. They break down dissolved organic material. They work continuously as long as the surface stays wet and undisturbed. And they take 2 to 4 weeks to reach full effectiveness after the filter is first built. Kill them once, by scrubbing, by letting the filter dry completely, by pouring water in too fast and washing the layer away, and you are back to day 1. 2 to 4 weeks to rebuild. Build it the way most people build it. Clean it the moment the top looks gray, let it dry out between uses, pour water in quickly because you are in a hurry, and you get what every failed medieval water system got. Build it the way the Cistercians at Fountains Abbey built it, and you get a system that served 300 people safely for 4 centuries without a single external input. Take your bucket. Drill or cut one hole about the width of a pencil, positioned 2 finger widths up from the very bottom. This is your outlet. Push your short plastic tube into the hole from the inside of the bucket. It should extend outward from the bucket wall about as far as your thumb is long. Seal the gap around the tube completely with a food-safe waterproof sealant or a tightly wrapped rubber gasket held with a small hose clamp. No water should escape anywhere except through the tube itself. Test it with plain water before you add any sand. Pour your coarse gravel into the bottom first. Build it up to a depth equal to your closed fist standing upright, roughly as tall as the width of your hand. This layer has one function, slowing the water before it exits and preventing the fine sand above from packing down around the outlet and blocking it. The slower the water moves through the entire filter, the longer the biology at the top surface has physical contact with whatever the water is carrying. Contact time is the mechanism. It is what the settling pools at Canterbury Cathedral optimized, with their upstream chambers drawn in 1153. Cut your mesh fabric into a circle slightly wider than the interior of the bucket. Press it flat onto the top of the gravel. This separator layer prevents the fine sand from slowly sifting down into the gravel over weeks of use. Without it, the 2 layers blend. Fast-moving channels form through the mixed material, and contact time collapses. The filter looks the same from the outside. The biology starves. Pour your fine sand on top of the mesh. Build it until the depth equals the distance from your wrist to the tip of your middle finger. Deeper is better. Every extra inch of sand column is more contact time for the water passing through it. The biology will establish itself in the top 2 inches of this layer. The rest of the sand column slows the water and intercepts the larger particles before they even reach the biology above them. The next step is the one most people skip. It is also the one that made the difference between a monastic water system that fed a community through 8 hard winters in sequence, and one that failed in its first season of heavy use. Prime the filter before you run any significant volume through it. Pour just enough water onto the sand surface to wet the top layer completely, a depth about equal to the width of your thumb. Then stop. Let it sit undisturbed for a full day. Do not add more water during that day. Do not stir the surface. Do not pour from any height. The water should be lowered gently to the surface, not dropped onto it. You are giving the first biological settlers the stillness they need to anchor to the sand grains. They arrive from the source water itself and from the air above. Turbulence at the surface is the one thing that prevents them from holding. The Canterbury Cathedral Waterworks design addressed this with its upstream settling chambers, still water before moving water, built into the architecture itself. After that first full day, begin running water through the filter every day without interruption. Not most days, every day. The biology you are cultivating is alive. Complete drying kills it as thoroughly as scrubbing. This is the discipline, the rule of St. Benedict, written by Benedict of Nursia, around 516 CE as the foundational document for Benedictine and Cistercian monastic life, embedded into every aspect of daily community function, including water management. Daily maintenance of water systems was not a preference. It was the engineering logic made mandatory, dressed as spiritual routine. Run the filter daily for 2 full weeks before using the output as drinking water. The output during those first 2 weeks is mechanically filtered, cleaner than the input water. Use it for washing, for watering plants, for anything that does not go directly into a person. On the morning of day 15, look at the sand surface. You should see a thin layer that is visibly gray-green, slightly firm to the lightest touch, and carrying a faint, earthy smell, not an unpleasant smell, the smell of damp soil after rain. That is the Schmutzdecke. That is your signal. The filter has crossed the line from mechanical to biological. It is ready. The test is simple. Fill a clear cup from the outlet. Hold it up against a window or a light. The water should be clear enough to read text through the glass. Not slightly hazy, clear. If it's not clear by day 21, the flow rate is too fast. Lower the height from which you pour input water. The surface of the sand should barely ripple when water enters it. Any real splash breaks the biology at the contact layer. Stillness preserves it. This is not a complicated principle. It is the same principle the Cistercians expressed in stone channels, designed to slow water before it touched their filtration beds. Maintenance follows the same logic as everything else in the system. When the top surface eventually clogs, and it will after several weeks or months of heavy use, you do not scrub the sand. You do not pour in cleaning solution. You take a clean spoon and remove only the top half inch of the surface. Place it in a separate container, rinse it once very gently with clean water, and return it to the surface. The Schmutzdecke will re-establish itself in 3 to 5 days, not 2 weeks. The organisms are already abundant in the water and in the rest of the filter bed. They recolonize the cleaned surface quickly because the conditions they need already exist. This is routine maintenance, not a restart. One bucket does this for one person. What a family of 4 does with 4 of them, output of the first filter, feeding the input of the second in sequence, is what documented English manor households from the late 13th century did with sequential stone-lined settling channels, feeding sand beds in series, as described in the manorial management literature of the period. Each stage of biological contact removes what the previous stage missed. 4 stages in biological sequence is not 4 times as clean. The improvement is exponential with each pass, because each stage exposes the water to a separate and fully active biological colony. What the monks at Fountains Abbey did with the same principle at the scale of an entire settlement, documented by Glyn Coppic in his 1993 English Heritage monograph, and confirmed through English Heritage's archaeological surveys of the Abbey site, was to engineer a complete gravity-fed network drawing from the River Skell, moving through bank-cut settling pools, through stone-lined channels and filtration beds, and distributing via lead pipe to every functional building on the grounds. The total recurring operational cost was 0. No chemical deliveries, no contracted service, no outside supplier of any kind. The system ran continuously for over 4 centuries. No bills, no infrastructure beyond what they cut and laid once. No asking anyone's permission. There is one condition where this works less well. Medieval engineers knew it. The way they solved it is the last thing in the script. Clay-heavy water is the variable. If your source water is heavily loaded with fine clay particles, the kind that make a river run the color of weak tea for days after heavy rainfall, a slow sand filter working alone will clog faster than the biology can compensate. The particles are too fine and too numerous for mechanical filtration to handle at a normal pour rate. The Schmutzdecke cannot keep up with a surface that buries itself in clay every other day. The Cistercians at Fountains Abbey addressed this with a pre-settling stage, a shallow stone-lined pool positioned upstream of the main filtration beds, where turbid water was held completely still long enough for the heaviest suspended particles to fall out before that water ever reached the sand. Robert Willis's 1869 documentation of the Canterbury Cathedral Waterworks drawing shows the identical approach, a settling chamber explicitly drawn upstream of the distribution point in the original 1153 design. The monks at Canterbury were solving the same clay problem 870 years ago with a bucket of still water and the patience to wait 4 hours. In your version, this is a second bucket with no outlet hole, positioned on a ledge or shelf above your filter, where you let visibly cloudy water sit for 4 to 6 hours. When it overflows, or when you ladle the cleared top portion, that settled water feeds your filter inlet. 1 additional container, no additional cost, no additional complexity. The same physics the Cistercians cut into Yorkshire stone. The Canterbury Waterworks drawing has been held in Trinity College, Cambridge for over 870 years. The Fountains Abbey water channel is still visible in the ground today. The biology still works. The physics still works. What you built does exactly the same thing. I do not know what brought you here. It does not matter. It works either way.